Um, okay, so kind of to start us off, I'm going to ask each candidate sort of to tell us about yourself and why you decided to run for this position.
Okay, well, thank you. My name's Susanna Johnson, and I'm running for Snohomish County Sheriff because I want to make a difference. I have 33 years of law enforcement experience and 30 years of that working at the Snohomish County Sheriff's Office. Actually earned my way through the ranks all the way from the bottom, which is patrol deputy sheriff, up to number 3 overall at the Sheriff's Office, which was Bureau Chief of Operations. So what's important to some folks in the community to hear is the types of jobs I've worked. So in addition to a patrol deputy and detective, I was also a canine handler, SWAT team member, squad leader on SWAT, and entry team member. After I was a detective, I actually was a detective sergeant. I worked in narcotics for 8.5 years, which is really helpful now with our fentanyl epidemic.
Right.
As a sergeant, I also worked in the Office of Professional Accountability, which is basically internal investigations. So that's good information I have now. And then promoted through the civil service ranks. So I was a lieutenant. As a lieutenant, I worked as a watch commander. I ran a precinct and also did hiring for 3 years. And then a patrol captain as well, where I was in charge of operations. My last assignment, actually, as chief of operations, allowed me to work with all of our contract cities. So I got to partner in our neighborhoods and understand how each community has a little bit different needs. And so being able to deal with crime fighting issues and being able to be responsive and be effective is really important. The reason I'm running, I was recruited by employees, community members, and law enforcement leaders around the region to challenge the current sheriff because we believe that we could do a better job with public safety, public trust, and employee investment. So that's why I'm in the game.
Nice. And it sounds like, I mean, you've had a lot of experience in all different realms within law enforcement. Has this kind of always been your goal to like end up going for something like chief or sheriff?
No, never was of any interest to me, actually, anything political. So I've had to learn a lot the last couple years, but certainly the last year since I've been running. It was really a desire to see change at the sheriff's office. I was actually part of a team that was trying to find somebody who was willing to run because we were so invested in a change in the position of sheriff. And at the end of the day, I was what the group put forward. And as far as it's mainly because of my resume and my experience, and also it's an intimidating process. And I was the only one that was not afraid to go try. So kind of a process of elimination. Then really nice thing is that because of the breadth of my resume, not only the things I described, but I also have a BA and a master's degree. And on top of that, I'm an FBI National Academy graduate, which puts me in a really good position for it. So no, to a degree, I'm trying to answer the call, but never plan this. I appreciate you asking that question because people don't often ask that.
Yeah, and it's interesting because, you know, I think sometimes when people start out in their career, they're either, I want to just be boots on the ground and I just want to do the work face to face, see the clients or see the customers or whatnot. And then that's all I want. And then some people are like, I really have this desire to manage and lead. And I want to be the best and the top and all of that. So I'm always curious, you know, how people found themselves in leadership roles. So.
Isn't that interesting? Because all I ever wanted to be was a patrol deputy. And then when I got an opportunity to have a canine and then to work in SWAT, I mean, I would have been happy to stay there the rest of my career. And it was good people around me that saw that I could actually do other things. So that what makes me unique is that I can do, first 20 years of my career was all the boots on the ground. And then now I have 13 years of also running organizations, which you really need both if you're going to run an agency.
Yeah, definitely. I feel like they're both very important qualities to have. And I'm a business owner as well. So when you don't do the work and then you become a business owner or you become a business owner, you know, you have to have both in order to be successful generally, unless you have really, really, really good supports and can kind of delegate effectively and everything. So it sounds like you, along with kind of all of these different roles that you've had, you also have lots of people who support you and can provide some guidance or, you know, expertise along sort of the journey.
Yeah, and that's a great observation, and your background can lend to this. You know, the smartest leaders have more capable people around you, right? You don't have to be the smartest person in the room. In fact, once you recognize that you want different opinions around you, it actually, the diversity of thought makes you more successful. And yes, I feel blessed not only to have, council members and mayors and, representatives from around the state that are supporting, that can help me on a lot of aspects, but yeah, the community leaders and other law enforcement, it certainly depend on them, because our challenges these days are very complex. So it is all about the community you keep.
Yeah, I love that you said that. I always tell people, if you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room. I love learning from other people. And so it's cool to hear, those connections that you have and pulling insight from other people. So have you called the Snohomish County area sort of your home for a while?
Yeah, so I started working at the sheriff's office way back in 1990. So I served Snohomish County directly for 30 years. I did retire in 2020 for just a couple of months, and then I was recruited by the Bothell Police Department. And so I've worked for the city of Bothell the last 3 years. I'm currently the deputy chief down here, but I am a Lake Stevens resident. So more than 3 decades serving Snohomish County.
Awesome. And Bothell has a very, unique in that it's half King County and half Snohomish County, right? That's complex and confusing. But I feel like the downtown sort of area in a lot of ways resembles like the uniqueness and almost a small town vibe that Arlington has. And so I think probably some of your experiences there would lend well to kind of some of the things that we experience in Arlington. But one of my questions that I want to ask everybody that I interview is, what is something that you really love about Arlington and about the Stilly Valley?
Sure. I certainly have always loved that area. When I was first a brand new deputy sheriff, I worked what we called the 12 area back then. So I worked graveyard, basically northeast of our precinct. So everything up through Darrington. I always loved, to a degree, the remoteness of it. It still has a small town feel. I certainly have a lot of support within the community, not only community leaders, but also council members. I flash back, and I want to be, don't want to go on and on every answer, but, the OSO slide, I was up there for, the weeks and months after that. And we still talk about OSO strong, and I'm not a direct part of that community, but was honored to work alongside of them through that crisis. And I think that helped really define that valley and things in ways that, we kept people off of that, initial rescue because it was so dangerous. And here's this community, Arlington and Darrington, they're out there looking for their neighbors. And to me, that really defines humanity and compassion, and really the Arlington area. So, and the generations of people that have been out there, that is who they are to the core, right? They take care of their brothers and sisters and their neighbors. And I love serving that area.
Yeah, I love how you explain that too. It does feel a lot like that here. And as we continue to grow, we're always talking about ways that we can make sure that we maintain that and welcome, the new folks into that sort of culture, so that we do all kind of support each other and have each other's backs and everything. And I think that really represents also like our business community. So specifically with the Chamber of Commerce, we're generally made up of smaller businesses. And so we do a lot of advocating for each other. But some kind of questions that we have come up with when just like discussing, various topics with candidates is ways in which each role can support the business community. So have you thought about kind of what ways that you would engage with businesses?
Oh, absolutely. And we've been doing it for years. We try not to segregate out the differences between supporting places of worship or faith-based community organizations and business. It should be all melded together for a true community. So one of the things that have been really important the last few years, of course, is some of the challenges with regard to our behavioral health structure and how that's impacted businesses. And that could be anything from the first person who's opening the door in the morning, and did somebody seek shelter in that doorway, to just making sure our community members feel safe to come shop in those areas. I always shop local whenever I need, resources for my house, whether it's repair or whatever. I always shop local, always support local businesses and encourage others to do that. But having distinct conversations, not only about accessibility and support, but obviously on the public safety end is having those conversations. And we do this all the time to make sure, like, people that work the later shifts, sometimes they don't feel so safe. So we spend time talking to the cashiers and stuff about being careful, being aware of their surroundings, and people feeling safe, because people won't shop in areas if they don't feel safe, and then the businesses can't thrive. So public safety has a big, important partnership to play with our business community.
Yeah. Have you ever had like a business that you've worked with specifically on sort of that education piece, or maybe they were struggling with, like you mentioned, like folks maybe taking shelter in their doorway? Like, what are some kind of things that you might do with the business?
All the time. Just, recently, Starbucks down here, I won't give the specific one, but they've been having problems in the morning, just as I described. I know the manager. I'm in there often enough that you get to know all of your business leaders around you. And their specific issue was, that first in the morning, unlocking the door, and they didn't want to call 911 because there's a couple of local people that will seek shelter in their doorway, and they don't want to get them in trouble. They're afraid of calling 911. So we have talked about resources, and we've actually been able to give more resources to those individuals. Sometimes it's just a matter of catching up with them. As you're familiar with, we were talking about the radar program down here, which you were involved with. Thank you for your service on that. And the importance of having that dual response with, social workers and trying to get people into shelter treatment and recovery is really important. But that would be the immediate example. We also have convenience stores. We recently were talking with them because there had been a robbery spree in South Snohomish County, North King County. So we went around and talked to the employees about, removing some of the posters from the door and really basic things so we can see inside. And no more stopping by of our officers and making sure they feel comfortable. And so, a lot of it is primarily crime prevention and also personal safety.
Yeah, definitely. And I think just the comment about taking the posters down just makes me think of those sort of like things that we as civilians do, thinking, oh, this is good marketing, or oh, this is good for us. But what we don't tend to think about is what like the law enforcement perspective might be and how that might impact our safety. That's a really good point. We've had a lot of businesses in Arlington that they do feel sort of like, I don't want to call 911 because it doesn't seem like that's an appropriate response. But at the same time, I don't know how to handle this. What do I do? And so those are kind of some of the things too that we're talking about. How do we, as like a chamber that supports our business, but also community members and neighbors that live here, how do we support our businesses and also those folks that are struggling?
I find too, even if you tell them over and over again, it's okay to call. Where we've been really successful is just the stop-ins and talking to the business folks and say, we want those calls. And to ensure that when they do call 911 in those mornings and an officer shows up, that it is with compassion and conversation, not you're imposing upon me, I have more important things to do.
Right.
And a lot of that is really about the philosophies that I think separate for me from my opponent. It's that really that service mentality that, everything is centric for me is our oath of office and serving our community with respect and humility. And if that comes through our culture, and people in the community feel that, they feel it's okay to make that 911 call. That officer or deputy's great to come by and make sure I feel safe. And that builds that trust with everybody.
Definitely.
But also it makes the businesses more accessible and the employees more comfortable.
Yeah. And I think some of the conversations that I hear or feedback is, well, it's not a crime. They're not committing a crime, or, maybe they've had someone who might have been at the end of their shift or not having the greatest day. And they say things like, well, it's not a crime for them to be here. They're not bothering anybody. What do you want me to do about it? And I try to encourage them, continue to call. It's okay. Part of that piece of law enforcement is that relationship building and, helping you feel safe. Just because a crime isn't being committed, they're still here to kind of help make you feel safe. And if that's not feeling safe, that's okay to call.
Yeah, that's a great way to frame that. what we like to tell people is, it's interesting because we're called law enforcement, but really it's about public safety. So
Right.
the actual enforcement of laws has become more and more minute over time. The rest of the time we're serving our community. It's just like when somebody is under the influence of a drug and maybe nodding off at a bus stop, they're also not committing a crime, but those are welfare checks, right? There's
Right.
many, many things. I would argue the majority of the things we go to aren't crimes anymore. They're
Mm-hmm.
just community caretaking, and it's a tough job to see that side of society, of course, every day.
Right.
But those that, and I give my hats off to the people that do this job, and are, because I'm not in the field every day anymore, of course,
Mm-hmm.
and it has become a difficult job. But where we are helping people, that's very satisfying. So yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yes, please call.
Yeah, yes. That's awesome. So one thing kind of that somebody had mentioned in the community was confusion around like policies or laws. I'm trying to think, like Blake decision was kind of one that there was a lot of confusion. What does this mean? How does this impact things? And so what are ways in which you might help educate the community on these laws or policy changes that they might not otherwise understand?
Sure, and I could see the confusion because we had, after the murder of George Floyd, we
Mhm.
had this national reckoning for the
Right.
profession, and I'm here to tell you it's okay, right? I mean, obviously we needed accountability and a lot of things because the diminishing trust with our communities was bad.
Mhm.
And so in Washington state, we had a lot of law changes we predominantly saw in 2021 and then also 2022, a few this past, this past session. So there was a lot of conversations, even commercials by the current sheriff that came out that talked about the restrictions that came out of Olympia. But
Mhm.
there wasn't any sort of follow-up that talked about some of those adjustments. So it did leave for confusion. So there's a lot of perhaps frustration, but
Mhm.
not
Some big
any,
feelings.
yeah, but not any current advertising and marketing of where we are now. So a lot of these things have been adjusted. This is not unusual. We get law changes a lot in Olympia, and sometimes you don't know the downstream effect of a change, and so we often do adjustments. So simply put, for today, where we're at on the Blake decision and law changes is we can arrest again as of this summer for drug possession
Mhm.
and drug use. So for a couple of years we couldn't because we just needed the law to say something a little different. And I
Mhm.
know we have like 10 minutes left, so I won't go into a lot of that. But anytime people are really want to have a conversation, certainly can reach out to
Mhm.
agencies and people like me who aren't taking 911 calls will return those calls and have conversations. But
Oh,
for
good.
those that are interested on this, we can arrest again for possession of
Mhm.
drugs. That's a good thing in my opinion. As I mentioned, I worked narcotics for more than 8 years, and I understand the intention was they were hoping people wouldn't go to jail, but they would seek treatment,
Right.
and of course it's addiction, so
Right.
people won't self-refer. So we
Right.
weren't surprised we didn't get a lot of that.
Mhm.
Um, Now what happens is an arrest will be made. People will, if somebody gets arrested, they'll go to jail. I think that's a good thing. Drugs
Mhm.
will be confiscated. The first charge that they have now with the law change is they can divert that and go to treatment. And of course,
Mhm.
that's our hope.
Right.
It went from a felony for mere possession to now it's a gross misdemeanor.
Mhm.
And if you seek that treatment, it won't be a part of your record.
Oh, okay.
So let's see, 10%. So my battery started going low. I'll have to plug that in a second. Sorry.
No worries.
So the treatment options, I mean, we're hoping that people will seek treatment because part
Mhm.
of the big adjustment or work to be done on fentanyl is obviously we'd love to reduce
Yeah.
the use and the demand.
Yeah, definitely. And you mentioned accountability earlier, and it just kind of made me think about accreditation. So I was checking out your website and I noticed that you mentioned working on accreditation. And so so some people probably don't understand what that means. So can you
Sure.
give us kind of the down low on what accreditation is and why it's important?
I love this question. So perfect. So in Washington state, you are not required to be a state accredited law enforcement agency. It's good to have, and I'll get into why you want to have a state accredited agency. And for the Snohomish County Sheriff's Office law enforcement side, way back in 2015, we worked on accreditation. It took 2 years to happen, and we became state accredited in 2017. good for 5 years. So in 2021 is when the reaccreditation comes in. And what that means is inspectors will come in and make sure all the law changes are in your policy and you can prove you're following the laws. There's a whole bunch of standards. When they came in to reaccredit, the current sheriff said that they were not prepared for that. I don't know what the issues were. He has said that some of the information was missing from files from the former administration. I can't attest to that, what those issues were, other than 2 years in, he said he couldn't do it. So they cleaned the slate for the current sheriff. And in 2022, he got to start all anew, but still couldn't accredit.
Okay.
And then again in 2023, still couldn't accredit. So they're not currently a state accredited law enforcement agency, and that is a big deal. And here are the reasons. It exposes us at the sheriff's office to higher litigation, which means every taxpayer, whether you live in the city of Arlington or out in unincorporated, that can impact you, and we can have more litigation. Insurance rates are higher for the county, so that there's a pass on at times for that to taxpayers. Professional standards means we're doing the job correctly. That helps with hiring, morale, retention. There's a litany of things that come from state accredited agencies, and hiring has been a real challenge. Even though the people there are working very hard, they're actually losing more than they're gaining at the sheriff's office. And so that's one of the core challenges we have in front of us. But there is a website where people can go look at Washington Chiefs of Police, WASPC, and it gives you all the reasons you want to be state accredited. Fortunately, the Sheriff's Office Corrections Bureau is still accredited, so that is a good thing.
Yeah. And so will you have, if you were to be elected, would you have oversight over the Corrections Bureau as well?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. Perfect.
Yes.
Awesome. And I had a follow-up question on that, and it is totally escaping my mind. Oh, yes. So I think of accreditation kind of, medical professionals, right? We have licenses. So as a social worker, I'm a licensed social worker. So the Department of Health sort of like checks in to make sure that I am practicing. And if there is a problem, they will investigate me and my license. And so I sort of think of accreditation as law enforcement's like license to practice kind of thing.
Yes. And some states it is required. Again, a little surprised it isn't here, but you can understand the breadth of the importance of that we need to be accredited. Yes, exactly the same.
Definitely. Okay. One last question. I'm going to try to choose. Here, this one is actually probably pretty good. So Arlington and the Stilly Valley are, generally speaking, quite rural. So many of our community members and business owners own firearms. So one question has been sort of, what is your perspective on responsible gun ownership in light of the recent conversations around increased regulations?
Sure. I am all about responsible gun ownership. I have my entire adult life have possessed firearms. Even before I was a cop, my dad taught me how to shoot in our backyard in Oregon. I have no problem. I think I am similar to about 60 to 70% of Americans that say I want to be able to maintain my gun ownership, and I don't mind having responsible goals or requirements. I don't mind going and qualifying and showing I can handle it. I don't mind background checks. And I think responsible gun ownership is very supported because people, especially in rural areas, want to be able to protect themselves, whether it's from people or wildlife. When you get out in really rural areas, you should have a right to absolutely protect yourself, and responsible gun ownership allows us to do that. And I absolutely support that.
Great. That's wonderful. Well, great. I mean, I think we could probably chat for hours about all the kinds of things that you're doing and want to do. But we'll call it a day for today. So thank you so much again for sharing your insight with us and with the Arlington community. And we wish you well.
All right. Thank you so much. Have a great day.